Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini, and I am joined, as always, by my colleague and Maple Leaf writer over at the Hockey Writers, Alex Hobson. Alex, great to see you again. How are you doing, buddy?
I've been doing great, man. Just watched the number one center on my favorite hockey team score 2 goals to first off set the franchise record and then score 50 goals in his last 50 games. So it's been a good couple of days for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. We're probably going to talk about it on the show. I don't know. Maybe we'll see what happens after I get through our usual read and breakdown before we get started with the show. This week's show is always brought to you by morningskate.io, a daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday, jammed packed with the best hockey stuff on the planet, with your daily dose of news, rumors, histories, funnies, quizzes, you name it, you will get it all. Hockey fun and information brought to you by the great writing staff over at the Hockey Writers. All you got to do is put in your email in the link below and you will get your notification right away. As Alex alluded to, the biggest news of the week was against the Dallas Stars. Matthews became the sole leader of the Maple Leafs goal record mark with 55, surpassing Rick Vaive's initial mark of 54, previously tied that before. And recently against the Montreal Canadiens, well, actually, he scored the game winner to get 56, and it just continued from there to get 57 and 58 against the Montreal Canadiens. And on top of that, he has become the first player to score 50 goals in 50 games since Mario Lemieux, and I believe that was back in 95, 96. And that's just an absolutely incredible feat. And there are going to be a lot of people saying that, oh, you know, it wasn't actually in the first 50 games of the season to get that mark. It really doesn't matter. It's 50 goals in 50 games at whatever point it is. It's an unbelievable feat. And Alex, Auston Matthews, we knew it was going to be it was bound to happen based on what we've seen in the first 4 years of his career, or 5. I can't even remember how long it's been. But throughout his career as a Maple Leaf, he's been a successful goal scorer, and it was only a matter of time. What did you make of the record-setting mark with Matthews?
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly just soaking it in every time we get a chance to watch him play. Obviously, based on when I was born in 1999, so I missed out on a lot of the glory days of the early 2000s. And, you know, I did catch a couple of years of Matt Sundin, but it was also on the tail end of his career. So this is really the first true superstar that I've had the pleasure to watch in his prime. During my time as a Leafs fan. So I'm just taking it in every single day. He's a special player. And what I will say to your point about how people will try and say, oh, he didn't score 50 in his first 50. If you're at a point where you're arguing that he only scored 50 goals in his last 50 games, and it wasn't 50 goals in the first 50 games of the season, then that should tell you a lot about how good Auston Matthews is and where the argument's at right now.
Yeah, and again, the last person to do that, just to clarify, was Mario Lemieux, 95, 96. And it doesn't matter if it was the first 50 or the last 50. It's still an increment of 50 games. And to have that goal per game pace regardless is impressive. And it's a testament to how well and how consistent he's been throughout his career right now. Absolutely phenomenal what he's doing. And he's on pace, according to Hockey Reference, to score 66 and eclipse Alex Ovechkin's 65 goal mark in 07-08. I mean, obviously, we knew that 60 goals was going to happen. He's only 2 away from now, but can he reach that mark? And is even 70 in sight right now?
Well, 60 is definitely going to happen. I mean, yeah. I'd be incredibly surprised if Matthews just only scored
Shuts
2 goals
right
in the
now.
last, 9-10 games of the season. If he decided he just take a rest before the playoffs, I don't see him slowing down at any point. I think you can see it in his eyes when he goes out there that he knows how good he is and he knows how much fun he's having, and he's going to keep going and keep scoring. Otherwise 70 goals. I mean, I think I'm not counting it out because this is the second game in a row where he scored 2 goals or more. He's Like, I'm running out of things to say about him. Like, I could sit here and be conservative about it and be like, yeah, well, that's still scoring 7. What would that be? Like 12 goals in the next 9-10 games. Like, that's a little bit much to ask of him, et cetera, et cetera. But we've seen him do things like that this year. So I'm not counting 70 out by any means. I don't think I'll count 70 out until, we only have a couple of games left this season, and he's clearly not going to make the record. For right now, I'm not counting anything out. I think 60s is definitely going to happen. 70 could be a safe bet, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think he does finish in between that 60-70 mark. It just seems like it may fizzle out. Not necessarily fizzle out, but I think, it just probably won't happen for 70. And then again, if it does, we'll be extremely ecstatic. I mean, we were ecstatic when he broke the record, and he's, inching closer to Ovi's record in the modern era recently. Just absolutely phenomenal, and about to tie Steven Stamkos. And this season alone, Matthews is tied with Draisaitl with 14 multi-goal games at this point. So again, testament to what he's doing. 4 hat tricks already. Absolutely killer pace with the goals per game, averaging, especially recently with 51 and 50. He deserves all the recognition, and I think the fans shouting MVP and cheering him on during that timeout in the game really was it just said it all. The fans are gracious. The team is gracious. And Auston Matthews is very humble and waving to the crowd. So obviously we know his character at this point. He's in it to win it. He's setting marks, but I think he said it best. There's more that needs to be done. And I think the team knows that as well. And speaking of possible historic marks at this point, we mentioned Auston Matthews setting the goal mark, but also it's really tough to see one person hit 100 points. Matthews is one away from doing that right now, but we could have our own McDavid Draisaitl situation where Mitch Marner is a few points away from the century mark. I believe he has 91, needs 9 more to get to that mark. This would be the first time, or if Matthews hits it, it will be the first time to have 100-point player since Doug Gilmour 92-93, and he'll join both Gilmour and Sittler as the only players to hit 100. But Marner's right up there. Obviously, slow start. We saw that at the beginning, but he just absolutely went on a tear in the second half after he got released from the COVID protocol, and he just absolutely dominated. It's hard to pinpoint what exactly happened, but how did Marner turn this whole, poor start, poor season around with the second half and just the absolute dominance that he's been on at this point?
It's funny because I remember the game, I believe it was the game either before or after he scored his first goal of the season, that super lucky goal against Detroit when the goalie gave it away and he had a wide open net to put it into. I remember he was like in his peak struggle right there, and somebody asked him what he needs to do to get out of his slump. And he said something along the lines of, I just need to stop overthinking everything, just have fun and play hockey. And it seems like ever since he said those words, he's been on an absolute tear. So yeah, I think it's incredible what Mitch Marner's been able to do this year. Obviously he had a lot of pressure coming in after the way last playoffs went. He didn't score a single goal against Montreal, only had 4 assists. Obviously not the kind of production you want from a guy that you just signed to a $10 million contract. So, yeah, I think he had a lot of pressure coming into this season, and the pressure only weighed heavier when he started off not producing the way he was expected to. And ever since then, it feels great to say that he's making people eat their words, and myself included. I know there were a lot of people, especially after the way that last year's playoffs ended, who were clamoring to trade him. And I'm not going to lie, I floated around the idea here and there as well. You lose to Montreal in embarrassing fashion like that, and sometimes it seems like the only option or the only way out of that is by shaking it up. But I'm glad they didn't trade Mitch Marner, because it seems like he took those comments personally, because he's absolutely killing it this year. And obviously the biggest test is yet to come. Whether or not he can do this in the postseason will be an entirely different discussion. However, it's super encouraging to see him heating up like this towards the last stretch of the season. And you can say the same thing about Matthews.
Yeah, it seems like the mentality switched. Like, I think Marner just went into high gear. I think maybe with all the talk, and like you said, we were, talking quite a bit about him and his play. I mean, there's no doubt about it. When you're getting paid that much money, you expect, you know, a little bit more consistency in production. And we're seeing that right now, where he has, out of all the points that he has 64 primary points out of the 90. Impressive. 18 multi-assist games at this point, and also 28 multi-point games. That is just absolutely phenomenal what he's able to accomplish. And you mentioned that he needed to simplify his game. I think he just needed to have that energy a little bit more, like we've seen to him in the past. With the speed, we're seeing a bit more tenacity from him, where he's being a little bit more aggressive at going into corners. You know, coming back on the back check, he was always known for that, but like being more aggressive with the stick list, creating turnovers and everything like that. And I think the most important thing to look at is the shot too. I mean, taking all those shots, taking all those chances, hit the 30 goal mark for the first time. I think we're seeing a new and improved Mitch Marner. The fact that he can hit the 100-point mark along with Matthews in the same season is definitely possible. And the way that he's getting those multi-point games, setting them up, shooting, he's become a more lethal, dynamic, and unpredictable threat. You always knew that Marner was going to pass previously before. Well, now he's got the shot going for him, and that's really important. And to correct myself before, he is 10 points away. He has 90, 10 more away. I say he does it. I think that with the clip that he's doing, he can actually hit that mark, and he's on pace to do that as well, according to Hockey Reference, on pace for the 100 actually. So we'll see if that can happen, and it'll be, once again, historic for Matthews and historic for Marner to become possibly, I've searched this up many times. I haven't seen it. The first teammates to hit 100 points in one season. That'll be really something to do, because Gilmore and Sittler had 100-point seasons, but different years. And Dave Andreychuk was one away in 92 and 93, but he split that season with the Maple Leafs and Buffalo Sabres as well. And also another 90-point season following that, but again, 1 point shy. So to see Matthews and Marner, that'll be really interesting to see. To recap the show, once again, this week's show is brought to you by morningskate.io, a daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday, jam-packed with the best hockey stuff on the planet. Your daily dose of news, rumors, histories, funnies, quizzes. Everything will be coming into your inbox. All you got to do is sign up with your email and the link below in the description. You don't want to miss out on this. It's great content brought to you by the Hockey Writer staff. Shifting gears to the next topic in the second half of our program. Obviously, with the win against the Montreal Canadiens, the Maple Leafs have clinched their 6th consecutive playoff berth. And I speak for all of us when, you know, it's great, they clinched, but, you know, now is when the work starts to happen. And Alex, obviously, big moment for the Maple Leafs. Obviously, Matt, everyone is saying that the work is only just beginning right now. What is the biggest storyline for you heading into the postseason now that they officially clinched the playoff spot?
Oh boy. I remember having this conversation around this time last year, and I'm probably going to say the same. I'm probably going to say the same thing now. Probably going to say the same thing now that I did last year. The biggest storyline. Well, there's actually 2 storylines this year. I think storyline number 1 is going to be goaltending. Jack Campbell and Eric Källgren. I mean, Campbell's looked better, to his credit, since he's come back from injury, but he's still had a couple of weak games here and there. Eric Källgren, he's looked good for the most part, but he also doesn't have the experience, and he's never played a single NHL playoff game before. So I think the big story is going to be if Jack Campbell can get his form back to where he was in October and November. And that's a lot to ask of him, because he was playing at a ridiculous pace. Like, I think his save percentage in November was like 957 or something. So obviously the Leafs won't need him to play that good. I mean, it'd be great if he wanted to, but it's not like they need 957 goal, save percentage out of their goaltending. However, they do need him to be they need him to be a solid starting goalie. They need him to play at a level where they can rely on him to make the saves when they need him to, and go out and do their thing and not have to worry about playing from behind constantly. I think aside from that, the obvious storyline is just whether or not the top players show up. That's literally all I come back to, because that was the whole storyline last year. Matthews only scored the 1 goal. Marner didn't score any goals. Montreal ended up coming back from 3-1 to take the series from Toronto. You're likely going to have a full playoff series out of John Tavares this time, bearing any other injuries. You've got Mark Giordano on your back end. He's another veteran who's been there and who's made these deep playoff runs before. And like at this point, the forward depth, everybody's kicking in new gear. You know, you've got Anze Cash out of the lineup, and look how good Pierre Engvall's played lately. Look how good Ilya Mikheyev's played lately. I think the third storyline is how good the depth has been. So overall, the Leafs need a couple of things to happen. They need their depth to keep clicking. They need the goaltending to be solid, and they need to show up. The Stars need to show up, and that's literally all I talk about all I think too when it comes to what the Leafs need to do to be successful in the playoffs. Because we know, based on these past 10 or so games, that they are more than capable of hanging with the top dogs in the division. Whether or not they get the Jekyll version or the Hyde version is going to be the storyline, I think.
Yeah, obviously 3 great storylines, and obviously the most important ones. Obviously, you need goaltending to be at its best. You need star players to produce, and you can't just rely on your depth players, but they have been clicking very well recently, especially Mikheyev and Engvall on the penalty kill with both their speed and their skill. For me, I think it's just going to come down to the defense. I mean, granted, there have been instances where Jack Campbell has bailed him out, but, you know, with him coming back from the injury, you just want him to be subpar and just above 900 at this point. You don't want that. Obviously, you would like the stellar goaltending that you saw from the beginning of the season, but you just want him to be consistent at some point. And the defense for me, I think, is going to be even more magnified because Dubas went out and brought a steady right-handed shot defenseman in Ilya Lyubushkin. We're seeing him make an impact. Although the points aren't there, you're seeing him do the little things that make him successful and are having an impact on the team, especially in their own end. You're seeing what Giordano has done and the impact that he's had on a younger player like Timothy Liljegren, who played extremely well, who is eyeing for a playoff spot and could be in that third pairing role. And I thought they were fantastic before, you know, some of the lineup changes happened and Justin Hall came in. It's going to be interesting to see how consistent they're going to be. And I think if you get the consistent defense that you saw, even if Jake Muzzin is anywhere near at like where he was last season, I think this is going to be a really great, you know, defensive unit going forward. You have great mobility in Riley, Liljegren, Giordano at times, but you also have the stay-at-home abilities of Brody with the active stick, Muzzin with the physicality, and Lyubushkin jumping up into the play and providing that two-way presence. I think that, for me, is going to be huge because Dubas made these moves. They were the areas of improvement that he needed to make. He did, and it's up to them to get the job done. Heading into our next topic, obviously we talked about the goaltending, the defense, forwards, everything, but Alex, you came out with a really great article this past week about how the Maple Leafs, their biggest enemy heading into the playoffs is not the Tampa Bay Lightning, not the Florida Panthers, not the Boston Bruins. They proved they could keep up with them, but themselves. And we've talked about the mental aspect of the game, the past failures, the fact that they should try to use that to their advantage. Does this season in any way, shape, or form give them that motivation and extra boost of confidence to put the past behind them and not make them their own enemy this year?
I mean, I'd be concerned if it didn't give them a little extra motivation after having to sit through an entire summer of articles saying that they should trade Marner or trade not Matthews, I guess, but trade Marner or trade Nylander and fire all this personnel, and having to put up with these articles from the Toronto media saying, oh, is this team good enough to do it? Did Kyle Dubas overcommit to his stars, et cetera, et cetera? I should hope that after having to sit in the Toronto media hotbed for an entire summer and listen to these journalists and these reporters and everybody talk about how pathetic that performance was, then I should hope that you have some extra motivation going into this year's playoffs. This is the best team I've seen in my time being a Leafs fan, and there's no other way around it. I said something similar last year, and they went out and they further improved the team this year. They've got what, six players now that are going to have over 50 points. They're going to have 2 players that are going to have over 100. Looking like they're probably going to have 4 total that'll have over 70. It's just, it blows me away how good this team can be when they're playing at their best. And it's a treat to watch. And this just goes back to what I was saying before about whether we're going to get the Jekyll version of the Maple Leafs or the Hyde version. And I honestly don't have too much else to say on this topic because I'd pretty much just be regurgitating what I said before. I think this is a massive series coming up for them, regardless of who they play. I think obviously priority number 1 right now is getting home ice advantage, because it'd be nice to have that little boost of playing in front of a packed crowd with or a packed arena with full crowd, full capacity. Obviously, Leafs didn't have that advantage last year, unless you want to count the 550 player or people at the game in Game 7. So yeah, it's a huge opportunity for them this year. I don't think there's any other way around it. And whether or not they make something of this opportunity remains to be seen. But this is definitely the biggest playoff run this Maple Leafs team has seen in probably since the early 2000s.
You mentioned it best too, and even Keith has alluded to it quite a bit, that this team controls their own destiny. This is up to them how they want to play. You can play like you had previously heading into the trade deadline, where you were inconsistent at times, playing strong one day, but not being there present the next. And, we saw their play against lower tier teams and how that impacted their, at the moment, positioning in the standings, but they were able to turn things around. If they have that mindset, if they dig deep, if they dial in and they have a different mindset than previous years, and they just continue to going in, even playing as the underdog role. I know you've talked about this, and even with Julian, how maybe they should take the moniker as being the underdog and not have that much pressure or, label on them. I think it could work to their advantage, because there's not as much pressure, and for them to thrive in that environment. But hey, the fact that they're able to keep up with the top dogs shows that they're committed and they can be the best. And I think right now, we said last year was probably the best chance. If they win one series this year, there's a good chance that they can make a deep run, because this roster does have what it takes. The player, the personnel, the mentality, and you're seeing that with Matthews and Marner leading the way. John Tavares, again, everyone was saying that, he can't score. Well, guess what? He is 4 away from 30, and he's 1 away from 70. As you mentioned, we could have 40 players with 70 points, 5 if Morgan Rielly gets 9 points in the remaining games. And that just proves that the star players are playing well. The depth is doing their part. And again, you see them like smile and laugh and have a good time, and that's great. But I think now that camaraderie, I'm just going to say camaraderie again, is going to be big for them in the future and in the playoffs. And I think that's going to be a really big difference maker if they can have that mindset, have the mentality, and control their own destiny in the right direction that they want. That concludes this week's episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to leave a like, comment, or a question down below. We love to get your interaction and answer whatever is on your mind. Once again, sign up for morningsgate.io, the daily newsletter brought to you by the Hockey Writers writing staff. They make great content every single day with NHL news, rumors, histories, and funnies. All you got to do is put your email down below and you are set. In the link below, sorry. Once again, for Alex Hobson, I am Peter Baracchini, and we will see you next week on the Maple Leafs Lounge.